Hi everyone, I'm Sandy, and today I am back with my 1001 book countdown. All right, so for today, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. As always, if you're not familiar with the 1001 Book Countdown, I will put a card up here so that you can go and check out the video where I think I'm actually wearing this exact same outfit. That's fun. But for today, I'm going to go ahead and put up the numbers, which are 987 and 28, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. The first book is called The House by the Medlar Tree by Giovanni Verga, I believe is the name. Giovanni Verga. Well, I got that right. And so this book is one I had for the Reading Europe 2021 challenge. If you watched last week's video, you know I had read Troubling Love by Elena Ferrante and didn't really... I had read it before and didn't remember, so I picked up another one, which is this book. And this book was much better than the Troubling Love book, thankfully. I really did like it quite a bit more. I will say that I struggled in the beginning because this is definitely a translated work. I believe it was translated from Italian, and the names are very Italian in the book. And so I will put up some of the text or some of the names up on the screen for you. I won't personally butcher them for you on camera. You're welcome. I did it once. This is the second time I'm recording this because I didn't like the first version. So, but it basically follows this family through a purchase where they borrow a bunch of money to make a very large purchase in the idea that they could get rich or make money quickly, kind of a scheme. And unfortunately, it goes horribly wrong. And they end up losing not only the whole, they ended up using that money to purchase lupins. And so I didn't realize a lupin is a nut. No idea. I had to actually look it up. But with that, what ends up happening is they end up having a very big set of misfortunes that happen, where they ultimately lose the entire shipment of nuts. And in addition to that, they also lose members of their family, and their get rich kind of or make money scheme went horribly wrong for them. And they spend the rest of the book trying to recoup their losses, trying to recoup and recover from losing members of their family. And it is just absolutely horribly tragic for them. It's not sad in like other books have been sad that affected me very emotionally. It was just a tragic story of family loss, and everything they tried to get back to where they were also went wrong. They put all of their hopes in like sardines at one point. They put all of their hopes on their grandson at one point. And no matter what they do, all of these different pieces, they can't get away from this looming debt. And ultimately, they end up losing their house by the Medlar Tree. And for the rest of the book, it's always about, oh, we're saving money to get back the house. We're saving money to get back the house. And it is so incredibly sad. And I'm not going to spoil the ending as far as what happens with it. It was just one of those books that you read and go, man, if only they hadn't borrowed that money in the beginning. In some ways, I think that was the moral of the story, is just you don't get yourself in too deep. You could end up losing everything. And that was the main takeaway that I had from this book. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars on Goodreads. I did think it was interesting. I thought that the things that I struggled with were really either around the translation or the character names and not about the story. And so that's why I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. But with that, I do get to go from 987 to 986. It's not on the 2021 list, so that number gets to stay at 28. Okay, so for the next two books, I don't know why I did it like that, are books I picked up for Pride Month. So for the first book, the one that I picked was Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. So if you're familiar with this book, you know I still haven't picked up a happy book. My goodness. This book follows a character whose name is David through a time in the 1950s. The book is set in Paris, and it follows his journey with a character named Giovanni. There is also a section in the book where it goes back to when David was a younger, I believe a teenager, where he has his first encounter with another boy. And that encounter made it very hard for me to like David. Not because of the encounter, but because of what happened after that. Because he basically ghosts that person and just pretends like that never ever happened. And I can't imagine how heartbreaking that must have been, not just for the boy that was ghosted, but also for David. This is where I struggled with his character, is back and forth between I feel such sympathy for him, and I feel such anger towards him for not maybe doing the right thing. But that's the first kind of like shade of how, or first piece of how I didn't necessarily like David. But so when he travels to Paris, he ends up meeting Giovanni. And so Giovanni they end up being in a relationship, and in the relationship they spend a large amount of their time in Giovanni's room. He lives in a one room, and the room is almost a central character kind of to the story. But one of the lines in here is, I scarcely know how to describe that room. It became, in a way, every room I had ever been in, and every room I find myself in hereafter will remind me of Giovanni's room. I did not really stay there very long. We met before the spring began, and I left there during the summer, but it still seems to me that I spent a lifetime there. Life in that room seemed to be occurring underwater, as I say, and it is certain that I underwent a sea change there. So really beautiful kind of that description of that they spent so much time in that room. And I felt like they were the most comfortable, the most themselves when they were in the room. Unfortunately, it doesn't last long. I mean, they referred to it in that particular section. When David first arrived in Paris, he had a friend, a girl that ended up going to Spain to think about kind of what she wanted. She ends up coming back to Paris, and David does essentially the same thing to Giovanni that he did to the boy in the beginning of the story, and completely ghosts him. Now, he and Giovanni had they've been running out of money. Giovanni had been fired from his job basically because he wouldn't have, I believe, a relationship with the owner, and the owner just, when he was rejected, ended up firing him and accusing him of stealing. And Giovanni does not do well after that. And David, again, just abandons him and leaves him to his own devices. And he has no money. Giovanni's not doing well, and David wires his dad to get funds, but not for him and Giovanni. He tells his dad that he's now engaged, and so now David is spending all the time with a girl that was in Spain, whose name I can't unfortunately remember. And I don't want to spoil the end of the book. It ends very tragically for Giovanni, in some ways also, like I said, for David. I was incredibly moved by this book. I thought the writing was really, really good. I was pulled in immediately to this story. I think I read the first 70 pages just immediately, and then had to take a step back to let it digest a little bit, and then read the rest of it. I did end up giving it 4.5 stars, and the only reason why I didn't give it 5 was really I didn't like David as much. I wanted to like him, but his choices, I can't imagine that being in that position of not being able to say that this is someone that you love or that you're in a relationship with. So I do have sympathy for the character, while at the same time hating what happened to Giovanni in the end. And so I highly recommend this one, though, if you're looking for an interesting book. This one is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, 4.5 stars. But with that, I get to go from 986 to 985. Amazing. And staying at 28 because, of course, it's not on my 2021 list. I know. Okay. But I do have another book, which is also for Pride Month, which is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. And I am going to say this was a hard book for me. I am not a huge fan of Virginia Woolf. And in some ways, I wish I would have picked the Alice B. Toklas autobiography, though it was longer. And part of the reason why I have such a hard time with Virginia Woolf is it comes up a lot in the in and out tag that people are reading, or that people have been doing lately, which is no paragraph breaks. How do you feel about no paragraph breaks? And you can see on this page there are none, and there's one small one here. The entire book is like that. And for me, that's really tough. I don't like it when a story does that. I will say that I liked Orlando much, much better than Mrs. Dalloway as far as being able to follow it. I actually did make it through this book, where Mrs. Dalloway, I didn't make it through. The main thing with this book is, so it follows a character named Orlando. You first meet him, I believe he's at court. He gets involved with a Russian princess and is seen kissing in the garden, and ultimately believe the queen was upset and expelled him from court. I could be completely wrong about that, though, because this book is very confusing, and I believe it was Stephanie Cohen, who is one of my subscribers, had said this book needs a second read, and I'm going to 100% agree with that, because I feel like I need to go back through it again to fully understand everything that happened, because there were pieces in it that I just went, what? But you start with Orlando. He gets kicked out of court. A little bit confusing kind of what happens after that. He ends up traveling, and while he's traveling, he has an event where he basically sleeps for several days, and when he wakes up, he says, "I am a woman." And from that point forward, all of the pronouns are referred to as she instead of he. And so that was actually the point of the book that I was getting a bit more interested in it. It also has some absolutely fantastic just portraits of Orlando at different points in Orlando's life. But that whole thing of where, at the point where the character Orlando goes from a he to a she, is where it was really interesting. And it was, she starts dressing like a woman, says I'm a woman, ends up in a relationship with another character, ends up married, and that part was also confusing because they would talk about how the guy was actually a woman and Orlando was actually a boy, kind of weird. So it was very hard for me to follow it, and I struggled with that a bit just because I think it was more about Woolf's writing than necessarily the topic. It just was a little bit, it was just confusing. That's what I'm going to say. It's confusing. But like I said, the points where he was transitioning from a man to a woman, I actually thought were really good and really fascinating. I just had trouble following the story. That's the bottom line, but it's not unusual for me with Woolf. So I'd love to know if you've read this book, what you actually thought of it, because I definitely struggled to get the theme and the character in the book, other than I know that one key plot point, which is when he transitions from male to female. So yeah, I would love to know what your thoughts are on this one. I hate to say I ended up giving it closer to the 2.5 star rating, primarily because I just have trouble connecting with Woolf's writing. I really want to love her as a writer. I wanted to love this book as well. I mean, the cover is just absolutely gorgeous. I think that's amazing. I love the artwork in it, but I just had trouble connecting to it. And I think the lack of paragraph breaks make it somewhat impossible for me sometimes to connect that way. So, 2.5 stars. Best part about it was when he transitioned from male to female. I thought those scenes were fantastically done. So, but with that, I go from 985 to 984 It's not on my 2021 list. So that number is going to stay at 28. And that's what I have for today. I got to carve 3 books off of my list. Super thrilled about that. Not unhappy with the choices, considering how good of a read Giovanni's Room was. And with that, I think that's it for today. So as always, like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully you're enjoying the 1001 journey with me. I certainly am loving that I'm making so much progress on it, and can't wait until I get to my first book milestone with it, which is 50 books, because I do have something planned for that, which I think will be really, really fun. And with that, until next time, everyone, thanks, bye.